Hey, welcome everybody. I think people are going to be popping in as time goes by here. I want to, I'll slowly do some introductory remarks to give people a chance to punch in. But my name's Jason. I'm the track lead for the FinTech and finance group, and we're just trying to do a lot more finance events. This is on the personal finance side, real estate side. There's a big MIT real estate grad program that has a lot of alumni in the area. It'd be great to get them engaged. So this is really a multi-purpose event. It's networking in general. It's the state of real estate. I don't know about you guys, every barbecue I go to, everyone brings up this subject. You know, like, is it time to buy, time to sell? Should we rent? So we brought together a roundtable of experts in their field to go over their areas. And really, we want to save a good chunk of time for a lot of Q&A and dialogue. So think about your questions, send them in the chat. In a few minutes, I'll put a link to the slides. So we've got a slide deck. We have a lot of questions, and yeah, I'll try to keep up with the chat comments as we're going when we get into the second half where we open it up more. So from there, let's see, I think, okay, why don't we start flipping through the slides, please, Serena? All right, again, quick agenda. So Ted Egan, he'll kick us off with some of the latest macro figures. We'll go around the roundtable with Ryan, who's, we'll do the intro, I guess, as we pass it on. But Ryan, he's based in San Francisco. Michelle's based up in Marin County. Evan covers a lot of areas. He could speak to some of his clients that have escaped the city, but you see especially there, multifamily. And then David Sass on the commercial real estate side, which, as we know, the jobs are ultimately what drove real estate in the Bay Area. So we're going to cover jobs. We're going to cover is it time to buy or sell. We're going to give the speakers a chance to, maybe they'll add their bias in there so you can, maybe apply that filter or think about, like, because we want to give you the data, but also, it's an extraordinary time right now. I mean, there was a poll that I saw, Michelle sent to me yesterday, like whether people think we should get back to normal or continue sheltering is all over the map. And so what that means, I've been in the investment business for so long, that just means, from an investment standpoint, it just means opportunity. Like there's just such a wide range of opinions out there. And when it comes to real estate, when it comes to supply and demand at such a micro, market scale, it's a huge difference. So these guys can talk about the supply demand dynamics in their area. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so as you guys know, and the vast majority of you guys are MIT club members, so nice work. We want to do more events like this. Send me your ideas, get involved with the club, spearhead an event yourself. We're all about furthering the local alumni and connecting them with each other. So at the end of this event, we will actually, we'll do a breakout where you can just, if one of the speakers, you got questions for them that you weren't able to ask them during the larger session, you can go break out, smaller groups. Okay, next slide, please. So a little bit about the club. For those of you guys who don't know, we're 16,000 alums, and that might even not count the graduation recently. So I think it was 15,600 was the last number I saw. A lot of events, a lot of virtual events. So there we have it. So, okay, let's kick right into, okay, let's go on to the next slide. So send your questions in, guys. Whatever it is, whatever you got, we'll do our best to cover it. And we'll have a breakout. It's pretty open. And again, the goal of this is for you as a home buyer, for you as an investor, or as a renter. Let's hopefully we'll get you some information or tell you where the stats are, or kind of you can at the next barbecue with distancing, Jan. Jerneka, with plenty of distancing in the chat there, you'll be able to talk real estate with facts, with data anyways. Okay, next slide, please. A little bit about me. I come from the wealth management side. asset management side. My bias on the bias sharing side of things is I think we have we have like all-time low interest rates. So you got to ask yourself, do you want to be a lender or a borrower in this environment? Is this a sign that they're just going to get lower and things are getting worse? You know, you're on your own for figuring, for taking your bet on that. But the fact is, when it comes to real estate, there are massive government supported subsidies. It's everything from the interest that you're paying to, I think what gets lost is in the media is the biggest tax benefit for many people in real estate is the ability to, as a married couple, to have up to $1 million of gains in their personal residence, completely tax-free. I have a client, boomer generation, that tax benefit alone has contributed to more than half of their wealth versus having had to pay the tax along the way. So anyways, it's massive. I mean, and there's, you know, think seriously about real estate, listen to what these guys have to say, make up your own mind. But it's a really strange time right now with 10-year treasury around 0.7%. That means for $1 million, you only make $7,000 a year before taxes. If you want to go corporate bonds, the ag is yielding 1.2%, which means the ag is the aggregate taxable bonds in the U.S. So 1.2% to a high net worth, to a high income California means $1 million after tax, that it's basically cut in half. You're going to lose about half of that in taxes if you're high income. So now you're making 0.6%, and that's before, and that's not going to get anywhere close to inflation. So that's why real estate is really interesting right now. So I'll stop talking and I'll turn it over to, let's go to the next slide, please. So for those of you guys who read the Chronicle on your tablets or the paper, there was an interesting article last weekend talking about San Francisco. In particular, and maybe I'll turn this over to Ted here, but basically sales tax receipts were only up 1% year over year in Q2 in San Francisco. And then, you know, there's a sign to me that people aren't here. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ted and let him share some numbers with you guys. Oh, Ted, need your...
I pressed the button and it didn't work, but thank you, Jason, and good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to be able to talk to you, even in these kind of disturbing times economically. Very little bit about myself. I'm the chief economist of the city. And most of the time, what that means is looking at new legislation that's introduced at City Hall, and we write economic impact reports on that. We also monitor the local economy and talk to the city's revenue generation folks, since obviously the city's taxes depend on the health of the local economy. And people have been asking me since the shutdown to give talks about the state of the local economy. And until maybe a month ago, the story for San Francisco looked like a microcosm of the national story, in the sense that you have a huge impact on industries that need people to congregate and need people to travel. And it's still clear that maybe 40 to 50% of the jobs in San Francisco in industries like hotels, restaurants, arts, lots of retail have dropped and not come back. And they're going to depend on a virus abatement, really, or people feeling a lot more confident about those types of businesses, as well as improved public health conditions for those things to get back to normal. But for people who are office workers, they sort of switched more or less seamlessly to work at home. Now, there are wrinkles, of course, around education, public education, or I'm sorry, K-12 education, and the transportation system. Public transit is a big issue. But what you really see across the country is a big split in terms of low-wage workers and the service industry getting the bulk of the burden, and upper-tier workers and office workers really not seeing the layoffs. And San Francisco, as I say, looked like a microcosm of that for a while. And then about a month ago, we started getting data that made San Francisco kind of stick out a little bit differently. The residential rent data that, so I think some of the other folks on the panel will be talking about, which started off bad, but not, started off worse than other places, but not really bad, has started turning really bad. So you've got an agreement from a number of reputable rental data providers that San Francisco's drop is A, severe, B, accelerating, and C, worse than any other place in the country. And that's kind of weird, at least if you look at the jobs data, because our jobs data is not very bad. I mean, again, like the San Jose area, we have a lot of office workers. They weren't laid off. So where does the weakness in the rental market come from? And then the sales tax data came out a couple of weeks ago. And it shows that overall, our sales tax dropped 43% from Q2 of 2019 to the last Q2 ending in June of this year. And okay, there was a big, obviously, shutdown and the GDP dropped a lot, and it's not surprising. But what kind of is surprising is we were the lowest performing jurisdiction in California, the worst county in California in terms of sales tax. Everybody lost, but no one lost more than us. And what's also very strange is every other place dropped a lot in brick and mortar, but virtually every place saw big growth in online sales tax. In other words, if you live in San Francisco and you order something on Amazon, or you live anywhere in California, where you live gets that sales tax almost all of the time. So if you're not shopping at a retailer because it's closed, and you're buying things online, that will show up as a drop in brick and mortar sales and an increase in online sales. But in San Francisco, there is no growth in online sales. There's a 1% growth, is essentially flat. Los Angeles had a 30% growth, for example. We have a 1% growth. So that leads to the question, you have a big drop in brick and mortar in San Francisco. You have no gain in online. That certainly points to sort of a missing consumer base, missing consumer spending. Now, yes, people are saving more than they were, particularly with the stimulus payments, but that's true everywhere. That doesn't explain why you wouldn't see any uptick in online. So I think those two things make me increasingly concerned about San Francisco. The big drop in rental, which you don't see in other places, and the sort of missing sales tax money. That yes, we are missing tourists, and yes, we're missing end commuters, but still on top of those things, you're still seem to be missing people. And so what that means is, San Francisco's economy is not a microcosm of the US economy anymore. We're having an only in San Francisco recession at this point, because we don't just have a virus that's forcing us to shut down. We don't just have people afraid to fly to San Francisco airport and stay in hotels and come to events and things. We also have people who are working at home and deciding, it seems, to move out of the city. When you look, we don't have direct data on who's moving out of San Francisco. But if you look across the Bay Area, you see the biggest rent declines in the cities that have the most tech workers. And San Francisco is, again, sticking out like a sore thumb, but so are a lot of places in Western Santa Clara County and down the peninsula. So what that means is part of the San Francisco reaction to this recession is people are taking the opportunity of working from home to at least temporarily move out of the city. And that means we're going to have also an only in San Francisco recovery, which is not only is the virus going to have to abate like it will everywhere else, and not only is consumer psychology and spending going to have to come back and confidence, but people who have moved out are going to have to make the decision, and their employers are going to have to make the decision that it makes sense to come back to a San Francisco office building and a San Francisco house. And I think that's a threshold for recovery that other places don't seem to have. And it's another wrinkle in our economic situation. Now, obviously, this shapes real estate. I'm not going to go into real estate because the pros are on the panel, and I think I'll stop here. But at least in terms of talking about our biases or where our perspective is, this is the perspective that makes me think we're in a little bit of uncharted territory. People have always tried work from home and decided they didn't like it, but now they have to like it. And the question is, are they getting used to it, or are they getting sick of it? And are the cost advantages and the flexibility advantages from work at home fundamentally changing office demand? Because if that's true, that means something for every city, but it means something, I think, more for San Francisco, because we have been so much more expensive than every place else. So let me stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions later on.
All right, thanks, Rita. And just a quick update. Doug, we're going to try to hit on the surrounding areas outside of San Francisco, but we needed to start with San Francisco because that's kind of what drives the whole Bay Area. Also, I put a link to the slide deck for those of you that prefer to flip through it on your phone or what have you, and we'll email it out. But basically, okay, next up. So our first real estate specialist is Ryan Richard. You guys might have seen him 2 years ago. There was an event at First Republic Bank almost 2 years ago. So that's where I met Ryan, and I was glad he was able to join. He's 7 days into fatherhood, Ryan.
That's correct. Yeah, we had our second son last week, Wednesday. So yeah, we're in it. Late nights.
We thought about doing this event last week, but we had it really was actually around Ryan's son, giving him a little time. So anyways, Ryan, go ahead and introduce yourself, take it from there, and tell us about what you do, Compass in San Francisco and all that.
Yeah, sure. I'm a MIT grad student with a dual degree in architecture and city planning. I moved out to the Bay Area about 8 years ago, immediately fell into real estate and have been loving it and doing it since. I think very similar to what Ted was saying, we are in very much uncharted times. It is a year that I have never experienced before. And so I'm hoping today to just sort of give you a little bit of insight of how that is translating to actual data and sort of what we're seeing anecdotally out there, both with buyers and sellers. If we want to go on to the next slide. So no surprise, I think there's been a lot of articles written both about the local San Francisco economy in the last week, as well as real estate. We've all seen headlines talking about price reductions, an abundance of inventory, as well as just depreciation within especially the condo market. And so that's kind of what I want to touch on mostly today. If we can go to the next slide. So this is basically just an overall chart for San Francisco County or San Francisco City, basically. And what I wanted to do is sort of break it out into the two different sectors, primarily condos and lofts, which would in this case not include TICs and co-ops, though they are tracking relatively similarly. And then also single family homes. This is basically just looking at median price year over year. As you can see in the single family home sector, we actually have seen an increase from 2019, and all of this data is basically taken a few days ago looking at the month of September. So we're basically comparing September 2019 to September 2020. But as you can see in the condo market, we actually have seen a sort of decrease in value. Next slide. And so breaking it out a little bit further, this is just going now looking at inventory, like what is causing that decrease in value. As you can see, single family home inventory has upticked a little bit, about 16%. But one thing I want to note is because of COVID, OSHA guidelines, as well as California Association of Real Estate guidelines, it is taking physically longer to sell houses because we no longer are able to do open houses. So you have to pre-schedule every appointment. So houses that used to sell in one weekend now on average are taking a little bit longer or seemingly longer. So it still is pretty impressive that the inventory for single family homes has only increased 16% despite that lag in the ability to show it. But as you can see, the condo and loft sector is pretty impressive in terms of the amount of inventory and choice that buyers have this year versus last year. Next slide. And this is absorption. This is basically, so we see all this inventory, how are things selling? As you can see, despite only 16% of additional inventory in single family homes, we actually have seen almost an 83% increase of single family home sales. So there is quite a bit of absorption in the single family home market, which sort of constitutes that 8.8% increase of median price that we talked about earlier. And then, but in the condo sector, it's up about 58% as compared to last year. But as you saw before, we already were closer to 89% in inventory. So the absorption of the condo market is not quite there, which is also, I think, why we're starting to see that discount in pricing in the condo market. Next slide. And so how does that translate on sort of days on market? We kind of touched on this before. And I think what this slide is particularly surprising to me because as you can see, there's no change in the average days on market for a single family home this time last year, 25 days to sell a house, which given all of the COVID precautions, I think is quite shocking that the single family home market has been able to stabilize like that. But as you can see in the condo market, as you would expect, it does take longer to sell a home. Now, I think none of this is probably all that surprising, especially if you have been considering the purchase of a property, just because in COVID, where we're thinking a lot about contact with strangers, cleanliness, having your own single family home with your own yard, your own door, your own garage is quite compelling versus like a condo where you have a lot of shared spaces. So let's go to the next slide. So here, and then this, and also just how to translate, how is this sort of, how are sellers or listing agents adjusting to this new normal? And as you can see across the board, we're starting to see less homes sell for over ask price, which list price, as I mentioned, 2 years ago, is really a subjective price sort of decided between the seller and the listing agent with a lot of guidance. And in this case, it does seem like listing agents and sellers are starting to price their property closer to what the actual value is that it will sell in the future. So we're starting to see that percent over list price decrease. Next slide. And basically, this is just breaking it down. If we're going to look in the condo market, like where are the deals? Where are we seeing the most amount of saturation? And as you can imagine, the two districts, District 8, which is sort of like North Beach, Russian Hill, downtown area, and then Soma, which we all know of as like South Beach. Those two areas have seen the most increase of inventory and the least amount of absorption. Again, kind of going back to that shared elevator, shared common space. At the beginning of the shelter in place, some of the condo buildings actually prevented any properties from being sold so that they wouldn't have strangers or buyers or listing agents, property contractors coming into the building. Next slide. This is just sort of how it's reflected in the median sale price. So again, here you can see in those districts, the more urban, the more dense districts, we have seen a decrease, which sort of aligns with everything we've been talking about so far. Next slide. And then again, this is just returning very back to the beginning. It's that exact same slide, just going back to why we are seeing the single family home prices sort of increase that 8%, and then the condos go down by about 10%, 9%. And finally, the question is, so where are these? In Noe Valley, we actually have seen prices somewhat stabilize for single family homes, maybe go down a little bit, like 3 to 4%. But the question that all my buyers are asking is like, what is driving that 8.8% single family median appreciation? And in this map here, I just highlighted neighborhoods that were both seeing a median price, average price, and price per square footage increase year over year. And what's really interesting is all of these areas are known for their single family home typologies, again, with your own yard, your own garage, your own door. But the areas that are most interesting to me are the Sunset, Crocker, Amazon, Excelsior, and Sunnyside. All of these areas are areas that are smaller single family homes, 3 to 4 bedrooms, maybe around 16 to 1,800 square feet. And they probably cap out at around like 135 to about 1.8. So what we're seeing in the city is a very robust sort of like middle tier buyer market who is maybe giving up their 2-bedroom condo rental in the Castro or downtown or in Soma and looking for an equivalently priced single family home further afield.
All right, thanks, Ryan. We're going to pass it over to Michelle. Full disclosure, Michelle's my realtor, but she doesn't look like she's making any money off of me because I got whiplash hearing about what's going on up in Marin County and up north. So might just be a renter. And also, anyways, we've worked together off and on for over 20 years. And I'll let her introduce herself, but the part she always leaves out is she's a 2-time world junior golf champ. And I saw her, she beat Tiger Woods when they were younger. I saw it on VHS. So I'll pass it over to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Jay. Nice to talk to everyone today. And it's been many years since I've played any sort of competitive golf, but Jason's always very complimentary, so thank you. So my history is I moved to Marin County right in the thick of the financial crisis, August of 2008. And I had actually sold my home in New York in early, like February 2008, negotiated an extended close, kind of felt everything didn't feel very stable. And boy, was I right in ways I didn't realize. And so I've been here now a dozen years, and pretty much in the last 5 years, Marin County has been incredibly strong, consistently strong, to the point where sales go up seemingly every year across the board. Maybe you'll have certain markets that struggled. And I would say after the tax law passed in 2017, we happened to see a little bit of softness, kind of anything over $3 to $4 million. People started checking about the tax write-off, the property taxes. It became sort of a subject matter. We didn't know what else could have contributed to what we saw is unusual softness at the higher end. However, the market always is pretty strong here. There tends to always be more buyers than sellers. And so it was always kind of muted. This year, since COVID, I would say that everything is just completely off to the races in ways that we could not have predicted. The first chart I have here is our Marin County statistics from the third quarter. And you'll see that, I mean, the average and median sales price just across the board in the county was up 21% year over year. And that doesn't, I mean, that's just the average. We have areas where it's up 40, 50% in certain areas. And we're also seeing this incredible sales price growth along with inventory, like the actual volume of growth is up. So incredible, increased amount of sales, record levels of home. If we go to the next chart, this next chart I'm showing is actually kind of shows just the typical sales trends. So if we were to go back 5 or 6 years, there's always a peak in the spring. April, May is always when we see peak closing of sales, and then there's a little downtick, and we always tend to get a little uptick after Labor Day, and then it kind of slows off, into the end of the year. You'll see the green chart on this, the green slide or the green stick is just completely unlike anything we've seen as far as behavior. What happened in April is we saw closings completely collapse because it was massive. Everybody was petrified and we were clamped down and we weren't really allowed to show homes. I don't believe. You could only do it privately. We hadn't really set any protocols. The industry hadn't. And then once we sorted it out and figured out ways to hand out disclosures and get people to sign and go through the proper protocols just to see homes, then we started seeing inventory build, and boy, did sales pick up like in ways that we haven't seen. So you'll see that the green stick is, we got up to 310 closings in July of this year. We've never been at that level ever at any point in the previous 5 or 6 years. And the last 5 or 6 years have been the strongest that we've seen in probably 30 years or maybe ever as well. So incredible strength on top of 5 years of really strong market. If you go down to the next slide, the pended sales graph, I included this because I think there's a really interesting data point in July of this year. So normally we have, it's pretty normal to have, a bunch of homes for sale and then a percentage of them under contract. And then a percentage of that is what's pended or what's in the process of closing. So it's very, very typical to have, way more for sale than what is sold, and pended is somewhere in between. And you'll see that in July of this year, we actually had we were about even, we had equal amount of pended as what we had available on the market. There was a period of a couple days in Marin County where there was almost nothing to show anybody. It was either properties were either sold or in contract or pending. There was almost nothing active to show, and anything that became active sold within days. So unlike what's happening in San Francisco, the trends of driving out people kind of pulling out of the cities and moving north, Marin County is definitely seeing this in droves. And, when it comes down to individual deals and properties, we're seeing 20, 30, 40 disclosure packets going out for every single listing. we see agents asking buyers to please not submit preemptive offers because they want to give everyone at least 3 days to even know that the property's on the market. Some people ignore it. You can see properties just go pending within a day or two of coming on the market, and then people just miss it if they happen to not be paying attention. So it's just been a very strong market in that almost everybody is frustrated. Very few people win the bid. My most recent listing was a home in Novato. We had 8 offers, all were over asking. The top 5 went into a multi-counter offer situation. And I would say that, did I price it? I actually thought that we priced it not that competitively. I thought it was somewhat rich based on the historical price to square foot average, but the market doesn't see it that way. The market is just clamoring for any home, especially out here in Marin County. So if we were to go on to the next slide, I mean, this 10-year chart of closed sales in Marin County just kind of speaks volumes. We're just, just an incredible number. 863 homes sold. And as you can see, there's no other year in the past 10 where it's ever been that close.
I'm gonna jump in just to emphasize that point. Like each region's so different. If you're thinking about buying, you need to be on the ball, and you got to really do your research. If you went on Zillow in July and looked at what's available up in Marin County, when Michelle said that they're all pended, that means they're listed, but they're in contract, or they're within 3 days of being in contract. So it's an extraordinary market. So I'll go ahead and wrap up, Mish, and pass it on over to Evan, if you can.
Yes, so that's the state of Marin, and then I just also threw in the Sonoma County market statistics because people care about that as well. It's further north, but highly desirable. Sonoma's average price, the actual town of Sonoma, was up 36% from last year this time, but Sonoma County on average was up over 11% just on price alone, and also increased sales. So we're seeing I would call this, I think we're going to look back on 2020 and it's going to look at like the year of the Great Migration. Everyone I know is talking about buying, selling, buying another home, moving. I feel like I almost don't know anybody who isn't discussing some sort of move, and we're feeling it right here in Marin County. So, yeah.
You got people thinking they're going to sell one home and buy another one, and finding out that they have to sign the rental contract for 12 months because they couldn't get anything. So you got that going on in some markets. But okay, let me pass over to Evan. I guess we're running behind on time here. So Evan's a former president of the MIT Club. He's also on the board, MIT Club Board of Advisors. And Evan, over to you.
Hey, thanks a lot, Jason. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. I'm a broker owner of a real estate company that focuses primarily on multifamily and primarily in San Francisco, although I do work in the greater San Francisco Bay Area. I've been doing this for 15 years. I sell to people who are looking to move into a 2 to 4 unit building as amenity, part investment, also to folks who are looking for pure investments. And I also own apartment buildings in San Francisco. I do development, and I live with my family in a 4-unit building that we own. So I've seen all sides of this over a long period of time. As a broker since 2005, and living in San Francisco since '97. So I've been through now 2 down cycles here in our city. Next slide, please.
And Evan, you got a bias? You want to tell us your bias either up front or on the back end?
Yeah, I mean, my strong bias is that twofold. San Francisco is a strong market historically. Even pre-1990, when there was no technology, San Francisco was strong. And then we drove out all the corporate headquarters. Chevron left and other corporate headquarters left. Tech came in and filled the gap. More recently, biotech has come in. It's a strong place. It's always got a low vacancy rate, now as an exception, but it does come back. And then secondarily, we are an over-regulated apartment market, and regulation creates opportunity. It just massively distorts the market. And if you're willing to pay attention and you're a little bit smart and experienced, you can make an outsized return. And so I'm generally bullish, and there are specific areas in this market that I think are worth attention. Okay, next slide, please. who buys apartments and why? Broadly, two categories of individuals who are buying apartment buildings in San Francisco. In the 2 to 4 unit segment, where your financing is very, very similar to a single family home, you find individuals who are buying primarily for an amenity, that is a place to live, but they also want an investment component to it. Why? You get more home for your money. When you have offsetting rents, your net monthly cost is lower for 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a yard, and a garage than it would be if you bought a condo or a single family house. The price per square foot of multifamily is lower than other amenity options, single family and condo. So, single family home in San Francisco, you might be $1,200, $1,400 a square foot. A 2 to 4 unit apartment building might be $800 a foot for similar quality. Tax benefit. When the tax laws changed and the amount that you could deduct on mortgage interest was lowered from $1 million to $700,000, that had an impact. Not so much multifamily, because the portion of your property that is applicable to your residence is a portion. It's not 100%. So if you're in a 3-unit building, you might claim 30, 33, maybe 40% as your amenity. The rest of the mortgage interest that's applicable to the investment portion is completely deductible because it's an investment. Similarly with property tax, when we lost the SALT deductions under the Trump tax plan, investment properties, probably because he's a large real estate person, we're still able to deduct 100% of property taxes as investment expenses. So when you've got this kind of hybrid use of a 2 to 4 unit building, the tax benefits are enormous. And then ultimately, you can get to a point where rents grow over time, your costs stay relatively fixed, and you can cover the entire cost, including property tax and insurance of a building off of rents. And that's a nice thing, and only possible in an apartment building, in a multifamily. Pure investment, like as I said, I'm bullish on San Francisco. There's a paper that was put out first in 2006, then in 2013 by some economists out of the Wharton School of Business in Columbia. It was called Superstar Cities. And they looked at the top metro areas, populations of 50,000 or more across the country for annualized price growth, real price growth after inflation between 1950 and 2000. So through many, many decades and many, many real estate cycles, San Francisco outperformed everybody, not by a little. It was double the average at about 3.6% real. So that's about 7.5% nominal average annual over 50 years. Double the average, and the second one was Oakland, and it was almost a full percentage point lower. So I'm bullish on San Francisco in general. Next slide, please. Okay, so it's worth just taking a second and saying, well, how do you analyze an apartment investment? What is a good deal? And there are broadly 2 quantitative factors that matter. One is the set of building metrics, what's the price per square foot? And then the second relates to the rent roll. So a rent roll is the list of tenants and how much rent they pay. And we look at this headline number, the gross rent multiple, which is the price of the building divided by the gross annual rents, the total annual rents. And then we would modify it. So in today's environment where you might have some people paying over market, you'd want to adjust those down in your analysis. In today's market where you might have some non-paying tenants, you would find a way to add that into your analysis. But that number helps you understand the balance of 2 numbers, the price per square foot and the gross rent multiple, can give you a pretty good idea of if a building makes sense, and they move in opposition to each other. And they're qualitative factors. Some neighborhoods are stronger than others. Some amenities are always important, and during COVID are much more important. For example, laundry in a yard. Quality of buildings, has it been upgraded over time? How much deferred maintenance is there? And unit mix, individual investor might have a preference for large units versus small. Next slide, please. Okay, so financing. Financing and loans are different for 2 to 4 unit buildings or for larger buildings and buildings that contain a commercial component. 2 to 4 unit building finances very similarly to a single family home, whether or not you're going to live there. It's underwritten based upon the borrower's personal finances. Down payment's a little higher than a single family home, might be about 30% in this current environment. But again, it's going to go off of your personal finances. A larger building or a building that contains a commercial component is underwritten based upon the building's finances. And in San Francisco, that means a larger down payment versus 2 to 4 units, probably 50%. It also means that if you've got a compromised rent roll, some non-paying tenants, some vacancies that you can't fill, it's going to be much harder to get a loan on that category building in today's environment. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're in a pandemic. Why am I here talking about multifamily? We heard Ted say that everybody's leaving the city. There's no sales tax revenue. Rents are down. You've seen articles from Zumper and from Realtor.com. I think the last one, the headline was, it's down 31%. Why on earth would someone want to buy? Well, 2 reasons. First, if you're looking for a place to live, there are some tremendous opportunities right now. We have more inventory than we've had in a very long time. Interest rates are generationally low. And it's, from a timing point, a good time to get into that in terms of financing cost and availability. For 5+ unit buildings, I would say that if you are cash heavy, there are now and there will increasingly be some opportunities to take advantage of owners and sellers' distress and get some phenomenal opportunities to purchase. Right now we have about 15% vacancy in San Francisco. That's high. Average is normally about 3%. And rents are down, I would say about 20%. If you stay in the neighborhoods, they're down less. If you go into elevator buildings in South Beach, they're off the charts high. But there are buildings with impaired rent rolls, and some subset of those building owners are motivated to sell. If you have cash and the increased down payment requirements don't affect you, then I think there will be an opportunity to get some screaming bargains in that sector. A couple examples from the last time around. In 2008, after Lehman Brothers, we had a very slow, almost frozen market in the initial parts of 2009 because there was an expectation gap between buyers and sellers. But the buildings that did transact did very, very well for the buyers. As an example, I sold 2 buildings for $1 million each, so the prices are higher now. In 2009, less than 5 years later, one of those was converted into TICs and sold for $3 million. And I tried to bring a buyer to the owner of the other one at $2.5 million, and he laughed at me because the value was greater than that. So when you have this massive market dislocation, there are opportunities to purchase, and I'm seeing that now.
Right on. Thanks, Evan. And since I'm in charge of the clock here, I think I'm doing my score's not so good, but quick update, guys. We got the chat. We're doing our best to kind of keep an eye on it, but if you can stay at 1, we'll do a breakout and you can ask your specific question, and whether it's multifamily. I saw SC2, which I know is Arnold, has a multifamily question about delinquency rates, but you can save that for a breakout on multifamily with Evan. You got questions for Ryan, Michelle. I want to get us going over to David because I wanted to have someone to represent the jobs, the commercial real estate side, office. We're in a world now where, I mean, the last stat I saw was old, but I mean, 1/3 of global advertising spend goes through Facebook and Google. And we just had a digital transformation acceleration, which means so much of business is being generated through online channel now. So there's hope. Maybe there's still hope that the jobs continue in tech here, but I'll turn it over to David. And I also want to do a shout out. Is there somebody in the South Bay that wants to kind of lead a South Bay breakout? Send me a private message. We'll figure that out between now and then. So I'll hand it over to David from here, and introduce yourself, David, and then fire away.
Thanks, Jason. And I'll make it really quick. I had a bunch of information, but I think we're just going to hit it because commercial is so much further off than what's really on the residential, other than right now, so many commercial buildings are empty. So many, they're all working out of offices in their homes, apparently up in Marin. But I wanted to just say that the market is still very, very discombobulated here in the Bay Area. And you'll have some businesses, obviously like retail and hotels, that is doing horrible. And yet there'll be some winners, obviously, like biotech, and you're going to have your distribution with Amazon. We have still deals being done. But the office market, I mean, today's the first day I've come into my office. And it's a whole new world. And how do we get people back into the office? And as long as this pandemic's going on, unlike residential, there's just going to be so many unknowns when it goes to the commercial. Just statistically in that, if you just look from after 9 great years in the commercial market of net lease absorption, raising rates going all the way through the roof, right now, we're just not seeing transactions, even though the market is flooded with money from the quantitative easing and the bond buybacks. And every other day you're seeing money wanting to place itself, but not knowing what to do. And while a pandemic's going on, why would you do a deal? If I'm a tenant and I can't even occupy my space and have tenants in, my employees in there, what's going to force me unless I have I've had tenants that they've just given up, that where they're just saying, I'll figure it out later. And they've actually, with their lease expired, they're going to just wait until they figure out how this thing is going. The stats are, that being said, are pretty flat. That if you look through from the third quarter of 2019 to the third quarter now, we're only seeing it going from, like an office, 8.7% to now 9.6%. But there's just no deals. There's no transactions. And I think it goes more to little points where we're seeing lots and lots of sublease space hit the marketplace. I think in San Francisco, there was 1 million square feet in the beginning of the year, and now there's over 3 million square feet on the market. There's only been this last quarter, I think, 2 deals between 50 and 100,000 square feet in San Francisco for office space. In the South Bay, we had 0 deals of over 100,000 square feet. And this is a market where there's generally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of square feet, the big Facebooks, Googles, and everybody doing deals. And what does that mean? I don't have the answer, because while this COVID is going on, I think there's going to be a fundamental change when we go back to work. And right now, while a lot of people think that they can do without office space, there are some people that, you know, working from home, they're thinking that's going to knock down their productivity. It's not going to help them with their creativity. But how do you go back to work right now? I mean, I'm looking at just getting on, if we have social distancing and I can only go 2 people on an elevator, I'm not going to come to my office. I'm going to wait. If I'm coming in at the normal time like it used to be with everybody else, there's only 16 floors in this building, but still, if I'm waiting for an elevator and everybody's punching in on the smart elevator and the elevator comes, there's people on other floors, there's somebody stopping. It could take me an hour before I could get to my floor, and I'm sure in the heck not going to go jump into the stairwell where everybody's huffing and puffing and trying to get a viral load of the coronavirus. With that being said, I know I'm just shutting down everything else here because I would really like to go to the breakouts, and I know we're running way behind on time here, Jason. So if there's some part that you want me to go with statistics or talking about what's going on in the marketplace, I mean, there's tons of very interesting things. And there's other parts too here with like this Prop 15. They're talking about possibly here putting the property tax on commercial buildings not being like Prop 13, where it can be reassessed every year. And that's huge for tenants, where the costs are generally passed through, and to owners. So anyway, with that, I think I'm actually being in the Silicon Valley. I'm going to get out of real estate. I'm going to look at doing a carbon collection machine and probably with a 3D printer to try to print some diamonds, and I'm raising money.
Nice. So what are you seeing fire sales now on these subleases? Are there fire sales yet?
You know, that's funny is that, like, if you look at the lease rates in San Francisco, which is really indicative that from the beginning of the year to now, it's only dropped from like $82 a foot to $79 a foot, not very much. But there's just not many transactions being done. And I'm hearing of some deals that are being done now, and obviously on the subleases where they're highly motivated, and we're talking that they're going to be closer into the $40 a foot. So there are some fire sales, particularly with sublease space. Landlords are holding on tight. It's just like with people with buildings that if they own it for sale prices, they don't like thinking that their property just lost a big, huge portion of the value. Appraisers are going nuts trying to appraise things for their value right now. While this COVID's going on, everything's so murky and there's just not a lot of velocity to try grabbing data points from. I'm more concerned with how is the office going to look when we go back. I think there's going to be a huge migration here to people at least part-time remote officing, particularly for the tech and the service industries that can do it.
But pretty early to tell, I guess, huh? How it's going to play out? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think that it's interesting is that right now on market demand that all the brokerage houses, they have tenant in the markets list. And at the beginning of this year, on pretty much every house is who's looking for space, how much space are they looking for? The numbers were running around 8 million square feet of tenants actively looking for space and that were out in the marketplace.
Got it.
Well,
Okay.
today it's 1.5 million.
Wow. Okay.
Everybody, why would you make a decision right now during a time of COVID where you don't know how you're going to be reutilizing your office? I mean, if I was in the Salesforce Tower right now and here I can go lease the 80th floor, just how are you going to be able to occupy it if these guys, these tech workers, where they had bench seating, where they had 100 feet per person average on the floor, and now you got to keep 6 feet distance. And how do you? I don't know that with San Francisco is particularly troublesome with COVID and how long this lingers. Is for the last 10 years, 20 years, we've been trying to more and more focus towards transit-oriented development, which means taking public transportation, getting into a high rise. And we're right now, I don't want to take public transportation. I don't want to be going onto a high rise. I mean, I'm back to give me the, where I can walk up to my office at best and not be in a cubicle position. Quite honestly, like right now, thankfully I have my own office, but if I was in a cubicle situation we're opening our office this week, if somebody sneezes or coughs next to you, I'm going to have a small coronary or crap my pants, It's like, still worried about it.
I hear you, David. All right, man. Well, thanks. All right, so we're bumping up against the hour. I thought there were some questions for Ted that would apply to everybody. Was there one more that we wanted to squeeze in? Ted, did anything come across your way that, or should we talk? I think Evan, did you have a question for Ted? Did we cover that one yet?
Yeah, Ted. We've seen a lot of tech workers leaving San Francisco, maybe permanently, maybe temporarily, until offices reopen in July of next year. Historically, what have been the main drivers of San Francisco's economy? I mean, tech has been here and prominent for at least the last decade and a half. What's coming in? What was here before? Are we now a tech-only city, or is there other stuff helping drive the economy?
Well, I mean, if you go way back, San Francisco was a manufacturing port, financial center until the 60s, and that started to go away. And then there was the major redevelopment of downtown, the high-rise era part, which really allowed downtown San Francisco office jobs to expand. And that really drove the city's growth until, let's say, the early 1990s. And then people in the city were sort of asking, you saw the Chevrons and the AT&Ts and so forth moved to the suburbs. And the city was worried about the diversity of its economy, and tech became interesting to the city. Now, I don't think the city particularly did anything to attract tech other than Mission Bay and biotech, but that's a fairly small piece of it. We saw big growth in .coms in the late 1990s. Almost all of them went away. But this decade has been basically all tech. And I think what you've really seen is it's directly tech. It is tech sort of shaping the other office using industries. So financial services isn't banks anymore. It's a lot of wealth management. And where does that wealth come from? Well, one way or the other, it comes from tech or real estate. And where's the real estate? Why is the real estate worth a lot? It's worth a lot because tech. So tech kind of becomes the tail that wags the dog. It's been that way in the South Bay for a long time. And now it's, I think, been in that way for San Francisco. So if you see a major, let's say, downshift from tech in San Francisco, and even if they come back at 50% occupancy, that's going to feel like a major shock. And yet it's not like the Bay Area is going to get so cheap that some other industry is going to sweep in and be the next tech. So I mean, I think the most likely scenario if that happens is you're kind of looking at a reset. Now, again, I'm optimistic that the macroeconomics are right for a wave of tech startups coming out of the recession, but we're not out of the recession yet. So I don't think you'll see signs of that yet. So I frankly think that given what people are saying about the occupancy of offices after COVID, it's going to take a while to get back to full employment in San Francisco.
All right, thanks, Ted. So we're up against the hour. We're not done yet. I want to give everyone a chance to ask questions, but we're going to break everyone up. So here's where the technical part comes in. So if you have the latest version of Zoom, you'll be able to self-select into a chat room. I'm assuming most of you do not. So Serena can jump in too if you got any instructions for us. But basically, number one, if you guys want to do a South Bay networking thing, let us know, send me a message. And in the meantime,